Alright, hello again everybody. Welcome to our next lesson here in the Age of Absolutism. Today we're going to take a look at Russia in the Age of Absolutism. So our objectives and standards to explain how Peter the Great modernized Russia and to analyze the rule of Peter the Great and Catherine the Great in Russia. And take a moment there to look over the standards, please. And our desired result, remember to include this in your weekly summary, please. How were Peter the Great and Catherine the Great absolute monarchs? So, a time of trouble in Russia. Prior to the 1600s, Ivan IV, whose picture you see there, did make some positive changes and tried to modernize Russia in the late 1500s. However, when his wife died, he believed that his wife had been poisoned and murdered, and he soon began persecuting those he believed were responsible, which soon earned him the name, maybe you've heard this name before, Ivan the Terrible. After his death, Russia fell into turmoil and chaos. Now, between 1604 and 1613, Russia faced many troubles. There were foreign invasions, there were internal rebellions, which caused many difficulties. Now, the rise of the first Romanov, a family that's going to come to power here, would change all that. However, Russia will still be a country that has yet to modernize like Europe. Russia really hadn't seen much from the Renaissance or the Reformation or anything like that. So Russia is kind of behind the times a little bit. So Russia's going to need to catch up with Europe. So changing times. Peter I took the throne at just 10 years old in 1682, and he took control of the government 7 years later. Now, Peter I, or Peter the Great as he will become known as, used his power to put Russia on a path to greatness. He spoke with European foreigners in Russia and later traveled to Europe to learn of new items and ideas. While in Europe, Peter the Great learned new advancements and technologies from Europeans that he returned home to Russia with. So, Westernizing Russia. Peter the Great brought home with him teachers, experts, and soldiers to help modernize Russia, again, to help Russia catch up with the rest of Europe. Now, he called his plan Westernization, and this is the adaptation of Western ideas, cultures, and values. Now, Peter the Great became the most autocratic ruler, meaning he pretty much ruled by himself, just like an absolute monarch would, by imposing many rules on the Russian people. One of them was land-owning nobles, known as boyars, had to shave their beards, and they also had to wear Western European-style clothing. Women and men were also expected to dance together at functions. This was kind of unusual for Russia. They were typically separated, and many nobles were kind of against this idea of the mixing of the sexes, of mixing of women and men together at these events, but Peter the Great brought this to Russia. He also brought the Russian Orthodox Church under his control. Boyars who disapproved or were arrogant of these new rules or changes were forced to serve in civilian or military jobs. And one of the kind of negative things that Peter the Great does is serfdom. Serfdom had been around Russia for hundreds of years. It had been abolished in Europe, but it still existed in Russia. So peasants are still working the land for these nobles, and serfdom will be expanded under Peter the Great, and serfs were sometimes forced to serve in the military or as laborers as well. So while Peter the Great is bringing about all these great changes, he still was a pretty strict absolute monarch, and anyone who refused his ideas or policies could be tortured and executed as well. So advancements for Russia. Despite being a tough ruler, Peter the Great also helped Russia expand in other ways. Academies for science and mathematics were established, and the Russian alphabet was simplified. Waterways and canals were improved. Russia will also see trade and exports increase, including mining and textile manufacturing as well. Now, Peter the Great also wanted to expand Russia's borders to the west and the south, and his chief goal was to obtain a warm water port. Now, a warm water port is a port that does not freeze in the wintertime. If you know anything about Russia, it can be pretty cold there. So these ports and these waterways can freeze. So Peter the Great is going to look for a warm water port so that way they can continue trade, and this would expand Russia's trade opportunities. So struggles for strategy. Located along the Black Sea, this is at the kind of southern western part of Russia, was a warm water port for Russia to possibly use. However, Peter the Great would have to push through the Ottoman Empire to achieve it. Now, despite attempts to do so, he's unable to defeat the Ottomans. However, Peter the Great began a war against Sweden in 1700. Now, Sweden dominated the Baltic region. Now, following early defeats, Peter the Great eventually rebuilt his army, after European models that he had seen and witnessed and help from, and defeated Sweden in 1709. Now, he won territory along the Baltic Sea and built the magnificent city of St. Petersburg. Here's a picture of it here. That actually is a bronze statue, I believe, of Peter the Great on horseback. So St. Petersburg, very well-known city today. A lot of people like to go visit it. And again, this will open up a lot of trade for Russia as well. Now, it will still be the goal of future czars or leaders of Russia to achieve a warm water port. But St. Petersburg kind of became his window on the West, quote unquote, and was a prime example of European modernization as well. So the expansion east. Peter the Great also looked to expand eastward. Russia signed a treaty with China that recognized Russia's claims to lands north of China and defined the common border between both nations. And Danish navigator right there, Vitus Bering, was hired by Peter the Great to explore the waterway between Siberia and Alaska. And this later became known as the Bering Strait. Now, Russian traders later built outposts in Alaska and Northern California, so Peter the Great helped expand Russia to the size that it is today. So Peter the Great's legacy, what is it? So the legacy of Peter the Great is kind of mixed. Russia did expand under his rule, and they did gain ports on the Baltic Sea. Peter the Great also helped expand the military, including the Navy, and isolation ended, and Russia began to become more involved in world affairs. However, like earlier czars, Peter the Great used terror and violence to enforce his power, and the expansion of serfdom also occurred, which further kind of divided and separated Russia from Europe. So the success of Catherine the Great. Following Peter the Great were a series of ineffective rulers in Russia. Now, a new monarch came to the throne, Catherine, or Catherine the Great as she'll become known as. Now, she was actually German by birth and came to Russia at the age of 15 to wed the heir to the Russian throne. In 1762, there were a group of Russian army officers who were loyal to her, and they disposed and murdered her mentally unstable husband, Tsar Peter III, who you see there. Now, it's still unclear if Catherine was involved in the assassination, but either way, Catherine does come to the throne with the support of the military. So, rule in Russia under Catherine the Great. She was an energetic and efficient empress. Under Catherine the Great, the provincial government was reorganized, laws were codified, and state-sponsored education began for both boys and girls. She also embraced Western cultures and values like Peter the Great did. She encouraged plays, writings, and other forms of European thinking. Now, Catherine the Great as an absolute monarch. However, just like absolute monarchs, she could be ruthless as well. For example, under her rule, boyars expanded their control of serfs and peasants, and Catherine the Great suppressed revolts by serfs when they tried to rebel. She was able to achieve Peter the Great's goal of a warm water port on the Black Sea after defeating the Ottomans, and she also seized portions of Poland, which included portions of Lithuania and the Ukraine, after agreements with other European nations. Alright, so our closure. How were Peter the Great and Catherine the Great absolute monarchs? Think about some of the policies they put into place. Think if they were strong leaders or effective leaders. What were some of their good policies or bad policies? And that will help you answer your question. Hope you have a great rest of your day or night. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.